And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that point of faith. If it's 1,000 people in the room that have it, that's the better. But if it's only 5, I'll work with the 5. I'm going to serve and love everyone, but I really am going to try to pour myself into those points of faith.
If you don't mind, let's take a digression. One of the interesting things in just working with you is I learned to prepare sermons in seminary, but the Lord's been working with you for a long time to actually look for faith in the room while you're, so I don't want to go too far down this road, but I'll just tell you, called to ministry at 17 and then educated in this, I didn't have anybody talking to me about look for faith in the room. And then if you don't find faith in the room, maybe use testimony of God's intervention. Mm-hmm. Or I've even seen you become even more pithy. Like, I'm going to actually be a little more obscure every once in a while. Now, you do this less now since the stage is bigger. Right. But I've seen you kind of like almost say to the crowd, are you really hungry tonight? Did you come to observe? Because that's not what we're doing. We're actually going to move in the gospel of Jesus. Yeah. So maybe you just speak to like something that's interesting about, like, I think it's interesting. You're actually trying to preach to a transformation, teach to a transformation, and to an encounter. And lots of times when guys like me, a little bit more like, I need to give you the right information so that you can articulate it. We're actually doing something different in a meeting. So yeah. I sometimes think you say things, even Chris will say provocative things like that, right, just because you're like, I'm actually working on the people in the room in the moment. Like, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we do, a huge part of my approach. I want to give them correct information. Absolutely. I want to train and educate in the scriptures, but I'm looking for that point of faith. What they don't need is more information.
Lots of Christians have plenty of information. They just don't act on it.
They don't
believe it.
They don't know how, or they've got two different parts of their life. They've got the theology part and their lifestyle part, and they're not often the same.
Or if they have a discounting idea, like Jesus was God, that's why, and so you're trying to address that discounting idea.
Yeah. Or they will look at somebody and say, well, it's because he's a pastor that he can do that, and I'm just a churchgoer or something. And so we do everything we can to obliterate those lines of division and to help people become aware of what God's actually commissioned every follower of Jesus to do. Not as a condemning, weighty thing, but as a challenge, as an invitation. And so I'm looking for that. I'm looking for the point of faith in the room. And, when I first came to Redding, I would, the Bible says to cast seed beside all water. So I would throw out the message, so to speak, for everybody in the room, but I would look for the 4 or 5 that have fire in their eyes. I'd look for the ones that I knew were already engaged with the reality that I was talking about, because then I can find where I'm going to pour my life. Because if we can create momentum within the church family by those who are really in hearty agreement, not just theological agreement, hearty agreement with you're going where I ache to go. If I can find those folks, then there's not going to be that separation in the congregation's mind. There's a separation. Staff does this, we do that. Yeah. And if we can create movement within the church, Cal Pierce, so powerfully touched by the Lord. Mm-hmm. It changed the nature of the church when he was powerfully touched, because now they see, the businessman that they've done business with for all these years is now functioning as Bill has been teaching us. So apparently it is for all of us, kind of a thing. Yeah. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that point of faith. If it's 1,000 people in the room that have it, that's the better. But if it's only 5, I'll work with the 5. I'm going to serve and love everyone, but I really am going to try to pour myself into those points of faith.
Wow. I hope this is instructive for folks that are just listening to our conversation, because they I think we all listen differently. Like
sure.
And then I found in myself, like, because Chris will preach inspirational, like he will be preaching to inspire sometimes. And I can, from my upbringing and my personality, I can sense I'm not going to be inspired. Like this thing rises up in me that tries to go, hey, you're trying to inspire me, big fella. Like, I don't roll there. You're like, hey, it's got to make a ton of sense. And so it's I have to like listen to that idiot voice and that kind of bent to listen to not be inspired. Like, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to inspire me. Well, that's not so easy to do. You don't know what it's like to live in here, So I actually, the Holy Spirit has to kind of highlight that and go, hey, let yourself be inspired in this moment. Like listen with possibility, listen with joy. And I think I began to reflect on that when you're talking about, I'm looking for faith in the church, in the folks in the pews. And I'm like, I don't know that I was ever preaching looking for faith, I mean, somewhere trying to create it. But I don't know if I was ever looking for it.
Yeah, oftentimes when you try to create it, you tend to hype things, and so I'm not wanting to do that. But the bigger part of what I'm doing in that context is I'm trying to find what he's saying. In that moment, I certainly want to find those, the eyes of fire is the way I describe the people that are really burning for what we're bringing. I want to find those people, but my main concern is I want to make sure that I'm saying what the Father's saying. I'm doing what he's doing. And I think we see that kind of thing with Jesus. He was not going to minister to the Syrophoenician woman, but when she responded with great faith, at least in my thinking, he was able to recognize what the Father was doing by recognizing faith in her, which is the invitation to do what the Father's doing. So that's the attempt of my life, is just to do the best I can with what I have to discern what he's saying, discern what he's doing.
Yeah, but when you're trying to follow the voice of the Lord and the heart of the Lord in your message while you're preaching, that probably takes years to learn, or is it hard? Is it?
I'll tell you how I learned it. When I learned it is I would read and pray and study all week long, but I used to lead the single adults here in Reading for a season, for probably a year or two, maybe 3 years.
That's before I came and did it. Yes. Maybe about 15
I warmed
years
them
before.
up for
you.
Yeah. And I felt, actually, it's going to sound weird, and I tell our own students, don't do what I did. Don't do what I did. But I felt that the Lord prohibited me from bringing sermon notes into the room, and that I was to actually get up and learn to hear in the moment.
Wow.
And so sometimes I'd stand up with nothing. And so I'd lead in a chorus.
Not nothing, but a week of study and regular prayer life with the Lord, but no notes.
No, you can always pull out things you know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But I want to impart what he's saying in the moment. Yeah. And I don't want to make it too spooky, but I felt like that was the call or demand of my life. So I had to learn how to do what he was saying to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a teaching role where you're going through the Gospel of John. Today we're doing chapter 1, and it's line upon line, precept on precept. I love that, but that's not usually what I'm called to do. I'll do it occasionally. I feel like I'm required to get into a moment where I hear what the Father's saying. And if he's silent, I'll be silent. If he's speaking, I'll speak. And that's the lesson I've been trying to learn for the last 40-some years, 45, 46 years, is just to hear what he's saying in that moment. And it's exciting for me when he begins to speak, because I can see that he's connecting the dots. Honestly, sometimes in study I didn't connect the dots, but as I hear what he's saying, all of a sudden, this is what I've been reading about this week or this month or last year, whenever it might be. So that's really my heart, is I want to learn to do that well. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just learning that there was another way to lead in the moment and preach in the moment than kind of the way I was brought up and learn to prepare sermons. It was really fruitful for me, and to just again enjoy the diversity of the calling on our life, what we're supposed to be up to.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're just talking about how you're in the preaching moment. You're trying to say what the Lord's saying and do what He's doing. So does that mean that you get it right all the time, or that your words are the very words of the Lord? Are you the new pope, or the new apostle, the new super apostle?
Goodness, no. The human element is so strong in everything we do.
Yeah.
It's like we see through a glass darkly. I mean, that's who we are. That's who I am. It's always going to be my best attempt, and it's going to be flawed. And there'll be some days I get it more right than others. But it's going to be my effort to honor him, to hear from him, and to say what he's saying. But it's not infallible. It is not equal to Scripture. Absolutely, it has to be based here. But no, there's a flawed element to everything. But that flaw doesn't give me the right to withdraw from my attempt to obey and please him.
Yeah.
I owe him my best, so that so that I don't use any excuses. I don't use an excuse, well, we're flawed and I'll just mess it up. No, it's worse if I don't do something.
That's good. And then it also is, it's that trust in the community. Like when the community feeds back and says, we heard you say this. Is this what you meant to say?
Right.
So we've kind of joked about when the feedback is this aggressive, or it never comes to you except suddenly it's in print somewhere, or, like some sort of conference. You're like, well, I'd have loved to have had a conversation. So you're not actually arguing with something I don't believe and didn't say.
Yeah.
But when you preach in community, and so even as rough and tumble as the internet or social media can be sometimes, there's that feedback level is actually helps us hear ourselves and go, oh, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah.
And so when we were talking, like, I didn't mean to say, since I'm trying to hear from the Lord, everything I say is from God.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. No, exactly. And in fact, one of the privileges for me, like in writing, is every time I have a chance to have you edit what I'm writing, because you'll come to me with questions, and sometimes I'll have a good answer, and or I'll fine tune the statement, or I've pulled some because it did not communicate what I intended. And that's, I think you've emphasized it right. It's when you're in community, when you're in people who are not afraid of you, but are willing to talk to you about their questions or whatever. That's one of the benefits. As we iron sharpens iron, we just get better.
Yeah.
And it's a huge part of our life.
And so, and it happens in community. Let's just go there super quick. But sometimes with the apostolic ministry, people are like, well, who are you responsible to? At that point.
Sure.
And I know that there are men and women who speak into your life and address things when they're. Did you mean to say this, Bill? You've already talked about some, friends that are scholars who will jump in.
Yeah.
I've had that. So you give me permission as somebody who works for you. I've come in and said, "Hey, did you mean to communicate this?" And so, partly the apostles, anybody who's functioning in an apostolic role is as how do I say it? They're kind of submitted to the community and ideally other apostolic leaders as well.
Yes.
Is that your experience?
You have to be.
Yeah.
If you become an island, if you're unapproachable, then you're prone to error. You will, left alone, you will create something that's not right. It's not accurate. It's not true. Yeah. I lived that with my family. They're growing up. I encouraged my children, my wife. I tell my wife, I say, honey, you know when I have an attitude that's starting to form, and you can help me catch it before there's bad conduct. All I want to do is please God.
Yeah.
I'm inviting you, please say, honey, you raised your voice here when you're talking to the kids, and you shouldn't have done that. And I invite her. And so that's honestly, that's how we've done life for as long as I can remember, since I was first married. That's the approach. And it carries over into church life. We want to have those honest conversations. I don't want dishonor. Yeah. I don't want my kids, doing this. I don't want, you or anyone else doing the disrespect thing. I can't control that, but that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But I am looking for community.
Absolutely.
I'm looking for honest conversation, because we got to live this life together.
Yeah.
None of us get to do this by ourselves. I've got to learn from who you are and benefit from it, and of course, vice versa.